the process that takes place in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as we go through the program have given me enough experiential knowledge to know that God is capable of anything, and that if I keep doing the things that He asked me to do and then follow the instructions in this book daily, I may one day get close to achieving the honor that they have bestowed upon me, upon others. You know, this program has done amazing things for an amazing number of people, and I am one of them. You know, I just feel blessed at the gifts that have been given to me by this process and this program, and the God that's been put in my life by following these instructions. And when I say following these instructions, I've come to do that. If you come tomorrow, you get to hear my story, more of my story. Today I'm getting there. I'm going to be talking about steps 8 and 9, of course. But I want you to understand a little bit about me before I get there. I'm the kind of guy who, if you're looking for comedy, you might as well get up and go downtown right now, because you don't get a whole lot of comedy out of me. And that bothers some people, others it doesn't. But I'll tell you where that comes from. That comes from the fact that I love you enough to tell you the truth, and I'm not in this to make friends. I've been put in a place where I've been given the power to help others, and I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to save lives and help God's children. I'm here to end suffering. There's something in the statement from the Lincoln Spring Fling that says that we carry the message to those the message of sobriety to the alcoholic who still suffers. And that's exactly what my life has become. That's the only thing I'm really interested in anymore, is just carrying this message, the message, to countless others. And that's what my wife and I spend our life doing. Our home group is a little group called the Fellowship of the Spirit Big Book Study. And that's what we do. We study the Big Book. We use a study guide that is not conference approved, and that stirred up some stuff in our area. New York says they don't care what you use. You know what they told me was, we don't care what you use to study the Big Book. We're just impressed that somebody's studying the Big Book. You know, and I found that to be true. Experience. That's what I have to share. And by disciplining myself to follow these instructions and do the things that are instructed in this book, the first 164 pages, it was referred to by one of the earlier speakers. Matt mentioned the little book that has no stories in it. I spend a lot of time with those, because I'm not real big on this. You see, here's the deal. Our basic text is pages 1 through 164. Text is designed for two purposes. Text is designed for study and application. So we study the information, we learn it, and we apply it. If we're working with an algebra text, we study algebra. But if we never apply it to a set of numbers, we never solve a problem. Same thing with Alcoholics Anonymous. If we study the text and we don't apply it to our lives and to our innermost selves, we don't solve the problem of alcoholism. We remain sick. And all of us know what that looks like. Some of us have experienced it. I am one who has. I see it a lot. I don't go to a lot of contemporary AA meetings anymore. I'm interested in literature-based meetings. Pretty much my only reason for going to a contemporary AA meeting or a discussion group is to find a new sponsee. And I seldom go to one that I don't find a sponsee. I sponsor a lot of people. I've got a lot of experience doing the steps and taking others through the steps. If we follow these instructions, we become members of the fellowship of the Spirit. And that's where our name of our group comes from, the fellowship of the Spirit. We encourage everyone to follow these instructions. And as it clearly states on page 84 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we become members of the fellowship of the Spirit. You see, we got two different things going on in Alcoholics Anonymous. We've got the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we've got the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. When we spend our whole life sitting in meetings and not doing the steps, we are members of the spirit of the fellowship. And we're welcome to do that. Our third tradition states that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. It should say that, or I believe that it should say, the only requirement for membership in the fellowship is the desire to stop drinking. Because if you want to be a member of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and become a member of the fellowship of the Spirit, there's some work involved. And I say work because that's what we refer to it as. The process of instructions in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We follow those and our life changes. We see transformations not only when we do it ourselves, but if we continue to follow the instructions and work with others, we really get to see the transformation in others. And that's a beautiful thing. The Big Book tells us that that's something you don't want to miss. And that's been my experience as well. You know, I haven't found anything in this beautiful book yet that hasn't happened for me and that I can say is not accurate. It's all the real deal. Step 8 and 9 are known pretty much as the amends steps. Step 8 tells us that we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Doesn't it say that? The Big Book tells us that we made that list when we did our inventory. Well, oftentimes that list is not completely thorough when we just simply look at our inventory list. What we find is that if we look a little deeper, there are many other people that have been harmed as well. You know, there are some prayers. And the first paragraph on page 76, it's actually paragraph 3, but the first one that starts talking about steps 8 and 9. And I like to read the Big Book in the first person. I like to put my name in there. And I don't know if any of you are experienced with that, but I'm gonna introduce that to you today. And there are many parts of this book that you can do that with. And what it will do is it will open your eyes to really how accurate and true this is for you. And what this paragraph says, and once again I'm going to read it, inserting my name in it. And at this point, we've just finished the 7th step prayer. Okay, and it says, now JR needs more action, without which JR finds that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. JR has a list of all persons JR has harmed and to whom JR is willing to make amends. JR made it when he took inventory. JR subjected himself to a drastic self-appraisal. Now JR needs to go out to his fellows and repair the damage done in the past. JR's attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of his own effort to live on self-will, on JR's will, and run the show JR's self. If JR hasn't the will to do this, then JR needs to ask. Anytime the Big Book tells us to ask, it's talking about prayer. It's talking about asking God. And when we ask God for something, we're praying. It says, if JR hasn't the will to do this, JR must ask until it comes. Remember that we agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Goes on to talk about we may have some apprehensions. Page 77 tells us what our real purpose for doing this is. It says that JR's real purpose is to fit JR's self to be of maximum service to God and the people about him. Okay, this is where I become free to walk amongst you. Then steps 8 and 9. When I look at this list, and my first trip through the steps was like most. It was as good as I could do at that time. And what I've learned since then is that it wasn't real thorough. And when I do inventory now, I have to look not only at the individual that I personally harmed, but I have to consider the people that were harmed by my harm. If it's a relationship, let's say, that I treated a girl bad in a relationship, I don't only owe her amends, but her mom and her siblings and her father, they all need to be addressed as well, because I hurt them. You know, let's not, and I've experienced this in my own life. When my children are hurt, it hurts me. It causes me discomfort. When my little girl comes home and she's crying and I say, "What's the matter, baby?" And she says, "That guy's not treating me well. The guy's breaking my heart. He's not wanting to be a partner in this relationship. He's wanting to run his own thing." It tends to mix some feelings in me and some emotions. And in the past, the old JR would instantly go to rage. I'll straighten this out. And shortly after that, I'm in handcuffs, going to jail. And that happened several times. Today, what JR does is he goes to a notepad, which, let me point out that there's a bunch of them on that center table. And I see that there's a healthy supply of ink and pens. And I go right there and I start writing inventory. And when I write inventory and follow the instructions that are in this book, amazing things happen. I'll take this jacket off if you don't mind. I'm going to share an experience with you folks, something that happened to me. Been about 3 years ago, 2 days before Christmas. My wife and I went to a meeting place there in a little town near us. And at this particular meeting, we went there together because they have an Al-Anon meeting and an AA meeting at the same time. It was very convenient. That time, my wife was attending the Al-Anon meeting quite regular, and I had an evening off work, and I went. Well, I got there, and I got into a rather in-depth and personal conversation with an old friend of mine there. And while we were talking, it was about time for the meeting to start. Maybe 3 or 4 minutes before the meeting started, and we were trying to finish our conversation. And we were in chairs, and we were down head to head, and this individual came up, and he interrupted our conversation to wish the other fellow a Merry Christmas. Now, this particular individual had disrespected me many times in the past, at meeting level. And behind my back, he had slandered me many times, and I had overlooked it. You know, I looked at the man, and Matt referred earlier to pages 66 and 67, where it gives us a prayer there. I knew that this man was a sick man. Now I needed to forgive him, and I needed to not retaliate. And this particular night, he interrupts our conversation, and it It gave me dis-ease. Notice the word dis-ease. D-I-S-E-A-S-E. Made me uncomfortable, and the first thought that came to my mind was, maybe he's going to be different tonight. It's Christmas time, and maybe he'll be a little kinder tonight. And when he finished saying good evening to the other fellow, I looked at him and I reached my hand out and I said, "It's good to see you. Merry Christmas." And he looked me right in the eye and he smiled and he made a gesture. He reached out like he was going to shake my hand, looking me right in the eye, and he turns away and goes. About a fraction of a second after that, he was on the floor. I physically struck that individual right there on the spot. What I know through the inventory process, and that's what happened, he split real quick. I didn't have a chance to make amends to him after the meeting. And I went straight home and I got out paper and pencil. I told Carlene on the way home, I said, this ain't good. This guy, I know he's a coward. The cops may be waiting at the house. They may catch up with us before we get home. I'm probably going to jail tonight at Christmas time. And in our county, El Dorado County, you go to jail two nights before Christmas, and you're probably not going to see the judge till a day or two after Christmas. I don't expect there would have been a prompt showing there. Nonetheless, I put all this on paper, shared it with my sponsor, knew what I needed to do. I needed to make amends to that man as fast as I could. Had a phone call, contacted one of my sponsees to also share inventory with him. I'm a firm believer in multiple fifth steps, where we don't just share it with one person. The big book says that we share these things with person or persons, plural. And I do multiple fifth steps. I called one of my sponsees to share this with him, and when I finished, I asked him if he had the guy's phone number, and he said no, but I know somebody that does. He got me the phone number. I had a hold of the guy and asked to see him, and he didn't want to see me face to face. Said he was afraid. And I said, well, there's no need to have fear. And he said, no, it's easy for you to say. And I made amends to him over the phone. At another date, I had an opportunity to face him face to face and make amends again, which I needed to do. The process works. It worked then, and it's worked since, and I believe that it will continue to work. Step 9, where we make amends to people, the big book gives us many different sets of instructions on many different situations for actually making amends, but there are some that aren't mentioned in the big book. The big book tells us that there are some people that can't be seen. I happen to have one amends left from my first inventory. There's a fellow that I haven't been able to contact or find. And it bothered me quite a bit for quite a while. And then I heard a man talk about making amends to people that you can't find. He called it surrogate amends, where you find an individual that reminds you of the person that you owe amends to, or a person who is just willing to listen to the amends from that person's standpoint, and you explain to them what you're about to do, and then you make amends to them, just like you would to the person that you owe the amends to. Now, this man's name is Kurt Mayo, and if any of you know how to contact Kurt Mayo, please come to me today when I'm finished, and hook me up with Kurt, because I still intend to and plan to make a face-to-face amends to him at the first opportunity. However, I have received great relief by doing surrogate amends. Now, this fellow was a guy that I played football with when I was in high school. And after a game one night, we were all partying, and I humiliated him a great deal. I exhibited extremely unacceptable behavior. The fellow was a black man, and what I did was totally unacceptable. So here we are down the road. I hear about surrogate amends, and this thing's been eating at me. I'm back working through the steps again, and the Kurt Mayo thing keeps coming up. I was working at a produce place, hauling produce. I'm a truck driver by trade. And into the warehouse that I was working out of, this new fellow comes to work. And he's a black gentleman, and he reminds me a little bit of Kurt. He has a big guy, well-built man, like Kurt was, or I hope still is. And I talked to my sponsor about this, and he says, if you need to talk to him about it, see how he feels about it. Well, as a little bit of time went by, I find out that this big new guy at the warehouse there is a Christian, and he's a very approachable man, and I kind of, he and I developed somewhat of a relationship and became pretty close friends, and I decided, well, I'm going to go through with this. So one night I told him, and I'd already told him, sometime I think I'd like to talk to you, away from everybody else. So one night I go to work and I tell him, I say, Kurt, I've been telling you I wanted to talk to you. I say, I can't wait. I need to talk to you now. He says, that won't be a problem. Where can we talk? I said, let's go in this trailer right here. So we shut off the light and we go in this trailer. It's dark back in there, and you can see a little bit, but if the people from on the outside can't see you back in there, And I say to him, I've got a problem, something that's bothering me. Long time ago, I wasn't very kind to an individual, and I'm hoping you'll help me work through that. And he says to me, and this guy's not in a 12-step program, but he's a very active member of his local church, and he says to me, JR, I'm on this earth to do anything I can to help others in their suffering. And I said, you're here to help God's children. And he says, that's exactly right. He says, JR, that's why God put two people on the planet in the first place. He put Eve on there with Adam so Eve could help Adam. I said, well, that's very interesting. I've come to know that as the truth. I told this man what I needed to do. I told him I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and that I was following the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And through this process, I thought that I would receive some freedom. And he says, well, let's do it. He says, can we do it right now? And I said, yeah. He says, I want to do it right now. I need this freedom. And I told him what I had done, and I told him that I was sorry. And both of us stood in that trailer, grown men, with tears streaming down our faces, looking one another in the eye. And he accepted my forgiveness. And he told me, he says, I need you to forgive me. And I said, man, that ain't what we're here for. And he says, well, I've done some things in the past that weren't acceptable either, out of a prejudice and racist view. And I think that maybe I can receive some relief by asking you for forgiveness. So that ended up not being, the purpose of this was for my freedom. But by opening up enough to follow through with the process, I was in a position where I could allow him to have freedom. Now that wasn't my work. I think that's some divine interaction or string pulling or whatever you choose to call it. It wasn't anything that JR did that brought that about. We find in this these two steps, making the thorough list and being able to forgive others, an amazing freedom. A freedom that we can only know by having the experience. You know, Matt talked about riding the bus, if you were here earlier. A man who sponsored me for several years used to tell a story about the smell of a rose. And I see my wife smiling at me because I somehow always, you know, I often end up getting to this story. And what he would say is that the only way to know the smell of a rose is to smell a rose. And he said, JR, if you and I were sitting in a park on a bench and we had a beautiful red rose and we were passing it back and forth and smelling it and discussing how beautiful it was, and a man walked up and said, let's say that Rick and I are on this park bench, and Bill walks up and says, what does that rose smell like? And we say, well, it smells good. You know, try it, have a smell. And he says, I can't smell. My nose doesn't work. I don't have the sense of smell. Okay, we have 5 senses. You know, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And he says that sense doesn't work. He said, I need you guys to describe to me what the smell of a rose is. And so I would take a sheet of paper, a blank sheet of paper, and I would start writing everything down in writing that I could think of to describe the smell of a rose. And Rick would sit down with the man at the bench and explain to him verbally everything that he knows. Then when Rick was finished and I was finished my writing, I would hand Rick the paper and he would turn it over and he'd start on the other side writing everything. And I'd sit down with Bill and I would explain to him the smell of a rose verbally. At the end of that, he would have both of our experiences, both written and verbally, of an explanation of the smell of the rose. With all that information, the question comes, would he know the smell of the rose? The truth is no, he would not. Because you have to have the experience. It's the same way with the steps. You can hear people talk about it. You can sit in meetings till the cows come home. Incidentally, the steps are not worked in meetings. Steps are worked between 2 alcoholics or Al-Anons. 2 people with something in common. The only way you can know a spiritual experience is to have one. You can hear about one a lot. I can tell you all about it. Everybody can tell you about it. But the truth is that the people who haven't actually had one are sharing their opinion, not their experiential knowledge. You have to be careful with that. There's a lot of opinions in Alcoholics Anonymous today. Alcoholics Anonymous has changed. We hear a lot of stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. I tell everyone that if you cannot weigh it against the big book and find it to be true, then it's probably not. You know, opinions have the power to kill in Alcoholics Anonymous. Experiential knowledge has the power to save lives. This process, this program is very powerful. Don't sell it short. The fellowship is part of the deal. And it's not a minute part. It's a huge part. We need to go out and work with others. We need to share our experiential knowledge with others. We need to have them share theirs with us. We need the fellowship. But the program is the program. And it's the answer. It's the answer to many, many things. You know, when I first came into the program, I heard some things that I learned later were not accurate. And I learned them the hard way, because what I learned was that I need the whole program. You know, a piece won't work for me. I tried the sitting in meetings. I followed the instructions of some of the people with opinions, and they told me to double up on my meetings. I later had to write them an inventory and go make amends to them. You know, because what I found was that going to more meetings will not save this alcoholic. You know, the big book talks about alcoholics of our variety. It's talking about the real alcoholic. It's not talking about heavy drinkers or moderate drinkers. This program will help them all. But moderate drinkers and heavy drinkers can get by with a little less than the real alcoholic. And I found out the hard way that I'm a real alcoholic. I've never relapsed. It was much worse than that. I would have been better off if I'd have just had a drink than what I had planned. My plan was not pretty. And well, it still happens occasionally, but when I first found out that some of the things I had heard were not accurate, I wrote more inventory about the fellowship than I did anything else. Because I was uncomfortable, and what I was uncomfortable about was that they could get by with not doing the things I had to do. You know, I have to start my day the way this book instructs us to start our day. When something starts bothering me, I have to go through the inventory process and find out really what it is. I have to get to the root cause. If I don't, it corrodes and erodes and influences my life, eventually to every area of my life. This amends process is a huge piece of that. Because oftentimes it's hard to go to people and say, hey, you know, I was wrong. And I need to ask your forgiveness. You know, the big book gives us a very interesting prayer for forgiveness. And I like to read this in the third, or in the with my name in it too. I don't know if that's the third person or the first person. But on page 66:4, it starts, and it says, this was J.R.'s course. J.R. realized that the people who wronged him were perhaps spiritually sick. Though J.R. did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed J.R., they, like J.R., was sick too. J.R. asked God to, and here's where the prayer starts, J.R. asked God to help him show them the same tolerance, pity, patience, that he would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended J.R., said to himself, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Very powerful, and even more powerful when I put me in there. It makes me realize how deep it really goes, and how selfish I am to think that I'm okay and they're not. It's very unfair. Seemed like there was one other thing that I wanted to address for step 9. Oh, I know what it was. Here it is. On page 82, the last paragraph, the paragraph 3, says the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. Well, my experience has been that that is very true. There is so much more than just not drinking to this program and this process, that when I hear somebody say that, I just feel so sorry for them. You know, I can tell you about being rocketed into the fourth dimension. I know what that means. I know what the book's talking about. I've had that experience. You know, the book has another little phrase in there earlier in the book there where it says we can become, and I just have to paraphrase it, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation. Boy, think of that. Think about that. A spearhead is the leading edge of God's ever-advancing creation. You know, we hear people talk about being intuitive, and we hear about psychics, and we hear about things like that. My experience has been that that's all possible. We've all got the ability to foresee things that we don't know, but we don't cultivate it. This work, which originated out of first century Christianity, is designed to get us back to the Spirit. Deep down within each and every one of us is where the Spirit lies. And we've all got it. It's in our heart. It's not in our head. Big Book tells us that our problem centers in the mind. We need to use our head and not let it use us. My experience is that when this book talks about the fourth dimension, it's talking about being rocketed into a spiritual dimension. And when it talks about the Spirit, it means that exactly. To become a channel for God. A conduit through which God can travel. His words, His messages, His thoughts. You know, my wife and I stopped on a back road one day, and there were many trees that lined this road. And her and I had we were getting ready to move on, get back in the car, and we had hugged one another, standing on the edge of this road. And something, I can remember looking in Carlene's eyes and her looking in mine, and something said, move. And her and I separated. And when we did, a tree limb fell right between us. If that tree limb would have hit us, it surely would have done some damage. Maybe it may have killed us both. And I believe that what that was my sixth sense. The Big Book talks about our vital sixth sense. Vital means life-sustaining or life-giving. So it's our life-giving sixth sense. I mentioned the five senses. The sixth sense, I've come to believe through my experience that it's the spiritual sense, where I know that I need to step back. Something's going to happen. Where I get that feeling in my gut, like I don't belong here. I'm doing something against the will of God, like something that I shouldn't do. I experienced this a while back getting on my roof. It was kind of damp out, and I needed to clean my gutters and my roof off and do my chimney. And I started to get up on the ladder. I got up to the top of the ladder, and I started to get on the roof, and something came over me and said, "Not today." So I got back down on the ladder. I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, boy, that's unusual. So I went back up to the top of the ladder, and I lifted my leg again, and I got this uneasy feeling came over me and said, "Not today, JR." And the next thing in my mind was like a flashing light, like a neon light above my head, saying, "Vital sixth sense, vital sixth sense, vital sixth sense." I went to the top of that ladder 2 more times to test it. And I came down that ladder, and I had a sponsee at the time that was without work, and I called him up and hired him to do it. Because I feel that strongly about the spiritual work that I've done. I've disciplined myself. The same sponsor that I referred to a little bit ago used to tell me, "JR, discipline is the horse we ride." Meaning that you have to discipline yourself to follow these instructions to get the results. You have to smell the rose to know the smell of the rose. You have to do it. There has to be action. Thinking about it, there's not much action in thought. For JR, thought is generally problem, because my problem centers in my mind. I think that we all have the ability to tap into that vital sixth sense. We just don't cultivate it. We've got all the technology in the world anymore, man. I don't even remember my own phone number anymore because I got it in my cell phone. And I used to know a bunch of phone numbers. I don't have the need to exercise that anymore, so I've lost it. I think the vital sixth sense needs to be looked at. The spiritual sense. If we were able to go back 500 years and sit around a fire with Native Americans, or maybe the Aborigines in Australia, because they were nomadic people as well. They traveled around. And we sat down at their fire one night, and we were having a nice discussion, and we said, "Hey, just how do you find your way around? I know you're moving all the time. How do you know where to go? You don't have a Garmin, and you don't have a compass, and you don't have a Rand McNally map. Now, how do you find your way around?" What they would tell us is that they follow the Spirit, or they follow the spirits. Because those people prayed to something. They prayed to the spirits. I'm a carrier of a Lakota pipe. I'm a Lakota pipe carrier, and I'm very proud of that. And in my experience with Native American spirituality has brought me to a place where I'm awake to the Spirit. I think the Spirit is the same God that other people might call Muhammad. I think it's the same one that other people might call Buddha. And I've studied a lot of different cultural, religious beliefs. What I find is a very interesting thing. They're all searching for the same thing. They're all going to the same place. They're all after God, the power. And personally, I'm not very caught up in what God is. You're welcome to any belief that you've got. The big book leaves it wide open. And I do too. I don't care if you worship. I don't care. One of the earlier speakers, I've heard him use the phrase Mashignovich. Worship Mashignovich if you wish. I don't care. And I don't need to have a vision or a solid belief in any one thing personally. If you need that, welcome to it. And if my belief causes you discomfort, once again, I'll mention the papers and the pens, and you can put my name in column 1. I don't mind a bit. I think you should. People all over the planet have. I think that it doesn't matter what it is, you just need to have it. Personally, I've come to a point where I'm not interested in what it is. I'm interested in the power that it has. I see that which is, and I don't even think I need to call it God, although this book says that we should. I don't have to call it Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus Christ, or anything else. I believe it's a big power plant. You know, I don't know if it's at the bottom of a dam or if it's a wind machine or what it is, but I think it's a big giant power supply. And it's dishing out power. And all we have to do is hook up our line to that source of power, which is, and bring it. I actually don't think that we need to bring it. We need to just hook up to it and it will drive itself. It drives me. It drives my life. I'm able to making these amends and making them thoroughly has given me the ability to be peaceful, to be able to sit quietly in meditation. I call it meditation. You can call it whatever you choose. You know, there's another big book out that's been around for a long time that says to be still and know that I am. I think that's a very powerful statement. Be still and know that I am that which is. Without this program, I wouldn't be able to sit quietly. I enjoy the quiet now. I look forward to my meditation time. I actually hunger for meditation time. I will search for opportunity for meditation time and time with that which is, that which always has been, and that which will continue to be. The supply of power for those who choose to tap into it. If it hadn't been for the ability to remove these things, and you know, I packed around resentments and fears and anger for a long, long time. And it was all unnecessary, but I didn't know anything different. How can you know what you don't know? You can't. I can hear somebody talk about it, but once again, I have to do the footwork that makes it happen. When I learned that there was a process for getting rid of that load that I was carrying, I hungered for it. And I still hunger for it. And I go to it quite regularly. It's like my place for fresh water. I go there. Every time I go there, I find it to be more free, more powerful than it was before. I am very grateful for this process. I can't describe my gratitude for it. It enables me to come see people like you folks. I haven't met anyone yet who I've found to be offensive. Brought the love of my life with me, and there are times when she's the most offensive person I could ever be around, but I wouldn't trade her for 10. You know, my life today is very comfortable and peaceful. It's a life beyond my wildest dreams. I've got a new grandchild. My wife and I had a son in our life who was involved in a very bad traffic accident several years ago, and he wasn't supposed to live. And they said he'd never walk. They offered on 3 different occasions to amputate one of his legs and his foot, and Today he's got all his parts and he's alive and well and doing some amazing work himself. He's got over a year in recovery now himself. He introduces himself as a recovered alcoholic. Amazing deal. Recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It's available to all of us. I want to thank you again for allowing me to come see you folks and be here in Lincoln at the 30th annual Lincoln Spring Fling. Thank you very much. God bless you all.